Back in the mid-1990s, Squaresoft and Enix were the lead publishers of RPGs in the console gaming world. The latter company brought us titles like Robo-Trek, Illusion of Gaia, and the Seventh Saga, but unfortunately for us RPG freaks, we didn't get nearly as many published Enix games over here as Japanese gamers did over there. And one of the overlooked games in this category was Dark Half, a title developed by West One Entertainment. They are the ones responsible for the Wonder Boy games, so North American gamers actually already had a taste of some of their work. But they had never produced an RPG before on the SNES, so this one stood out to a lot of people who played it at the time. But why is Dark Half so underappreciated compared to some of the other Super Famicom only RPGs? And is it worth playing today? In this video, I'll answer those questions and give you a full overview of Dark Half. But before I do, please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more retro gaming and classic RPG content. It was a true shame that Dark Half never received an official English translation, but that issue has now been rectified by way of an English translation patch that was finally released in 2015 by List Translations. They've really done a lot of great work on other obscure RPGs, so I was super excited to play this one in my native language for the first time. You can check out the patch in the link in the description below. And just right up front, I have to say if there was one word to describe Dark Half, it would be unorthodox. And that's because this game bucks almost all the typical RPG tropes, starting with its story narrative. This one has you playing as two different characters in separate locations, Ryukyu and Falco. No, not the Falco from Star Fox though, in case you were curious. According to the intro crawl, Ryukyu is a lord of darkness of sorts that came to be known as the Fallen One. He's feared by all of mankind and has absolute power. However, he was eventually overcome and sealed away long before the events of the game by a saint named Rhoda. Many years pass and a heroic figure named Falco is born. At the very beginning of the game, he and his brother Jose head into a cave to stop the return of a dark force called the Demon King. However, the two fail to accomplish this task, and the Demon King is reincarnated as Ryukyu in a new form. The story takes off from there, and you actually play in chapters that alternate between Falco and Ryukyu. And the cool thing about this is that each character has specific, incompatible goals that set them apart from each other. For example, Ryukyu can literally eat the souls of the people he finds along his journey. And whatever you want to say about that, let's just be honest and say this is one unique gameplay mechanic. You even get to see your victims beg for mercy before you do this. Now that's sinister. On the flip side, Falco gathers rays of light from the victims of Ryukyu as he comes across them. And sometimes these fallen victims even fight you in battle as a corpse. And this will catch you by surprise. And that isn't the only gameplay difference between the two either. Ryukyu can recruit monsters you find in dungeons to fight for him, but they aren't directly controllable in battle, whereas Falco can recruit player characters that can be controlled. And this is a pretty big difference too, since the AI of Ryukyu's monster companions is, abysmal. On top of all this, there's a gauge called a soul meter in the upper left portion of the screen that both characters have to keep filled through these mechanics, and if it's ever depleted, it's game over no matter what. This system really encourages efficiency and really discourages you from ever going off the beaten path, because if you do, you're always running the risk of not having enough souls to get to the next area. It's definitely innovative, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't stress me out. You're just always forced to think about it, and it nags at you like a hangnail. The battles kind of combine the strategic grid style of games like Final Fantasy Tactics with some of the turn-based classics like Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest. The battlefield is grid-oriented, but the maps are much smaller than you'd find in a lot of the turn-based strategy games this era. Also, elevation doesn't play any role in this one, but your position as compared to the enemies does. The soundtrack has kind of an ambient feel, and it's super brooding and gritty. There's a lot more Ryukyu than there is Falco in this soundtrack, if that makes any sense. Lots of synthesized horns, strings, and organs in this one. The battle themes are a little quicker paced, but those do more to spook you than they do to pump you up. So this soundtrack won't overwhelm you with incredible melodies or anything like that, but it does do a good job at setting the tone, and there's a lot more atmosphere here than in other soundtracks. When I decided to make this video, one thing I knew I wanted to praise Dark Half for was its storyline narrative. It was pretty darn daring to divide an RPG between the protagonist and antagonist perspectives, and let the player play both. I actually can't think of many other RPGs that ever did that, with the sole exception being Breath of Fire 4, and that one came after this one. A typical playthrough will last you 20 hours or so, and it was great knowing that the storyline just had to be headed to a final showdown between Falco and Ryukyu. Just thinking about what would happen when the two clashed kept me intrigued the whole way, even through all the monotony of the random encounters. Besides the narrative itself, the coolest aspect of this to me was the things that you do in Ryukyu's scenario influence your experience when you get to those same locations with Falco. For instance, if Ryukyu leaves some NPCs to live, Falco can talk to them, gain information, and even special items at times. Conversely, of course, he can't do any of those things if Ryukyu kills those NPCs. The only problem with the way this approach worked is that you can find all the themes and cliches in Falco's chapters in just about every other RPG from this time. You know, stuff about a chosen one, warriors of light, and paladin stuff. But you can't find the stuff in Ryukyu's chapters anywhere else at all. And this makes the gameplay lopsided because Ryukyu is just so much more interesting to play than Falco. I mean, who wouldn't want to play as a dark, villainous demon king? Doing that's just super unique, and it makes his section stand out that much more. In the end, Dark Half is definitely worth playing, and I certainly recommend it. I'll admit that its graphics won't impress you at all, considering it came out in 1996, and there were loads of other games that blew it out of the water in that respect. But the gameplay and storyline narrative is super unique, and the battle system was pretty solid. It's just cut from a different cloth than most other RPGs from this time, and it will seem refreshing to you because of it. The sound isn't anything special, and the soul meter can be a little stressful, but overall, this is a fun game that really deserves a lot more attention than it gets today. But I want to hear from you guys. What do you think about Dark Half? Is it an overlooked SNES RPG or an overrated dud? Let me know in a comment below. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell for more retro gaming content. I also want to give a big shout out to my Patreon patrons and YouTube members. If you want early access to the videos I produce and other perks like they receive, please consider supporting the channel by becoming a Patreon patron or via the YouTube Join feature.